Okay.
Mr. John?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening to my brothers and sisters. Fellow, let me quote from the presidency, fellow Ghanaians. It's indeed a privilege for me, for us to have this very particular engagement, because it has always been our focus as students, especially those of us pursuing higher degrees. Be acclimatized and be used to the tenets and the beliefs that governs our course of work. So today, God willing, I'm going to lead you in a discussion, and then we are going to look at introduction to academic publishing, writing, submission, and successful publication. It is going to be an engagement. We're going to be an interaction, but as the name suggests, I'm just a facilitator. I am going to try as much as possible to lead you in these discussions. When we finish, if you have issues, we have concerns, we have suggestions, we have inputs, I think we all do it together. I hope you are with me. Okay, so as I indicated earlier, if you find yourself in any institution, whether it is in academia or in a corporate institution, it is expected that you exhibit some characteristics. It is based on these characteristics that one is able to align him or herself with that particular institution. So fortunately on our part, we find ourselves in schools, and there are certain laid down procedures that we must satisfy, requirements that we must satisfy as students, as intellectuals, in order for them to award us degrees and other forms. And one of the very important area of our discussion in academia has to do with publications. If you find yourself in academia, for instance, if you begin to work in the university or any tertiary institution, if you are given an appointment letter, you have three major mandates, three of the major mandates. One of them has to do with research. One has to do with corporate social responsibility. Then the other one also has to do with knowledge construction or teaching. Let me say teaching. So basically, when you are in an institution, if you are in a university or a polytechnic or anywhere teaching, when you are given an appointment, your scope of work includes research. It means that you must contribute to knowledge, you must teach students, and you must also try as much as possible to contribute to the community that you find yourself, both national and international. So it is not of place that as students in the various institutions, one of the requirements for an award of a PhD, sometimes the master's, is that at least you must come out with a research publication. So we must do that. So we move ahead. What I would like to say is that this discussion, quite frankly, I took it from various sources, combined with my own experience over the years as a publisher or as an academician. So that is the disclaimer. Now, this is the outline of our discussion today. We will be looking at academic writing. We'll be looking at, briefly, academic writing on its own. If you want to delve so much into it, it is a whole topic on its own, which can take years to finish. So it's just an aspect that we are going to look at, introduction to that. We look at types of papers that are required for publication. We look at structure of an academic research publication, that is a manuscript. We look at how to write academic publications papers, the do's and the don'ts. I indicated earlier that every society you find yourself has its own laws, and the laws must be governed strictly to make sure that there is discipline and coherence. Then we want to look at what do publishers want? if you want to venture into publication, there are certain things that publishers will always look for, journals will always look for. We'll look at them briefly. We'll look at a checklist for journal selection. One of the major issues that has to do with publication has to do with how to select the right journal for your manuscript. Sometimes you do a very quality work, you do a very good work, but if you don't know how to select a journal, your work will be rejected from several journals, and then you begin to ask yourself whether you are making any impact or not. So there's a need for us to look at how we can select some good journals and then how we can submit our manuscript. Then finally, we'll look at very important resources for all researchers. As researchers, there are certain basic things that we must know. I hope you are with me. Hello?
Hi, we are here. We are here.
Okay, so let's continue. So for instance, yes. So we look at academic writing. What is it? We want to say academic writing. What is it? We said that documentation and presentation of processes. So the basic underlying, we say documentation and presentation of processes, outcomes of an academic research, following a set of widely shared procedures and rules in an academic community. I made mention that if you go to the hospital, for instance, they have their community, and there are certain standards that goes on in the hospital. So if you are not, for instance, a health professional and you enter the hospital, certain time we find ourselves very in a tight corner because we are not able to understand how certain procedure and certain things work there. In academia, that is what happens. So when you talk about academic writing, it's about documentation, presentation of processes, the outcome of an academic research by following the underlying ways, or the ways that I've highlighted are very important, a widely shared procedure and the rules for the academic community. Now, we can also look at it as a strictly formatted report for your research processes, results, contributions to human knowledge. I indicated earlier that if you find yourself in the academia, you must contribute to human knowledge. So when you talk about academic writing, there are processes and results, contributions that we also make into what? Into human knowledge. So basically, these are some of the things, when you talk about academic writing, that is what comes into mind. What you are writing is going to be documented. If you have the opportunity, you present them. But whilst you are trying to write this and present them, they must follow a shared procedure and rules within the academic community. That is the reason why when you write a paper, you just don't send it to the journal and then they tell the next day they are published it. It must go through a series of processes to ascertain whether it fits to be part of the academic community or not. Then we said that academic writing, it is also a high risk task. Academic writing required a very high risk task that requires professional training with guidance, exemplary academic work, reading first-class work. You just don't get up and start publishing. Before you start publishing, you should be somebody who read a lot. I've always told people that, quite frankly, naturally, I don't sleep. I am the type who doesn't sleep. I spend less than 2-3 hours in the night sleeping because you'll be sitting and the idea will come, you need to put it down, you need to type and do this kind of stuff. And as you do it again and again, then you become familiar with it. That is where the skill will come in. Other than that, if you don't practice it, if you don't train it how to do it, then you are going to have challenges. Then you must also be the kind of person that reads a lot. You must read a lot. And not just any kind of reading. Within the academia, you must read first-class work. The books, the journal papers, degree thesis, and other things. So I'm always on the net. I'm always searching. I'm always reading. I'm trying to find gaps. I'm trying to find loopholes in people's work in order to come out with my research. The name implies it is research. You are, when you say you are reinventing, it is not that what we are doing is new, but you are bringing a new dimension to it. So that is it. Then in your academic writing, there must always be justification. All major academic writing must include justification. You just don't say that I've selected Rose and Mary as my sample size. Why did you select them? What criteria did you use? So every step of the process of academic writing, there must be justification. And the justification must be convincing. It is not just any ordinary, informal way of convincing people. It must be convincing. Right from the beginning of your writing process to the end, Every stage of your writing process must be what? Justified. That is it. Then nothing can be taken for granted in academic writing. So here we are talking about formality. You don't take anything for granted. Every step must be taken serious. So basically that is what academic writing entails. Now, this is what we call the academic writing process. Academic writing process. Now, the basic thing, you start from the red. You say you must know your topic. For you to know your topic, how do you come about a topic? Can I ask my audience just to pause a minute and find out, how do you find a topic for your study? Hello, anybody can help us?
Hello.
Yes, can anyone help us? How do you come about a topic? How do you get a topic
Hello.
for your study? Hello?
Yes, I'm Millicent. For me, I
Yes.
come
Yes,
about
Maya.
my topic. I come about my topic by reading other articles or reading
Yes.
other people's work. So the more I read, the more I get other topics.
So let me ask this. When you read people's work, what do you look for? There must be pointers. What do you look for?
Actually, for instance, before I write something, maybe let's say I'm in the classroom as a teacher and I've observed a problem in the classroom, but I don't actually know how to put that as a topic. So I go and read related papers to that particular problem I've encountered in the classroom. So per that,
Okay.
then I pick my topic.
Okay, for now, we'll discuss it into details as to how to come back. There's any other idea? How do you come by a topic? Do you just
Hello?
wake up and say, yes, I'm listening, my brother?
Yeah, I'm Zach. I
Yes, please.
think, first of all, you might have a little idea about what you want to do.
Okay.
For example, if you want to look into animals, what idea are you looking into? So if you have the first idea about what you are thinking of, then I can go ahead to read some related works or articles that have already been published. Then in trying to read these published papers, you might also see some problems in these particular papers that they have solved, but there are others that have not been solved. So the problems that have not been solved, you can use that and add to your idea, and you can come up with a topic that you want to work with. I think this is my opinion.
Thank you very much. I think we are going to have time, but in academic writing, the idea is what we call it a gap. When you are reading people's work, you try to find a gap, things
Okay.
that are not satisfactory tackled. There can be, when you are reading somebody's literature, you can go, most of the time, most literature will tell you that suggestions for future research. You read those sites, they will give you idea as to the next. It could include a sample size, it could include a methodology, every aspect. So I think we are all right, but we'll discuss this very, very important, because this whole thing of coming out with a title or a topic for your research is one of the biggest problems that people face. I know people that start their thesis, and then they are not able to finish the thesis because they were handicapped alongside, because they could not go through the writing process. So when you say academic writing, we have coming out, you must know your topic. You must read and research. You are researching. You outline a plan. You just don't get up and start writing. You must outline a plan. You start writing. Then the writing, you do what we call review or editing. Then you go along that line. So it is not easy. Let's go along. I think we'll discuss this very well. Now that we now understand what academic writing entails, let's look at, when you, assuming we have had a topic and we want to start writing, one thing we must also consider is the type of papers we want to write. Yes. Now, most of the time we have what we call research or original articles. I happened to be part of the first presenter when the first day, and he mentioned something about originality. It means that what what makes something original? It means that the methodology, the every aspect, the literature and every aspect, you are trying to contribute something new to knowledge. So one of the major type of articles, or for instance, papers that most journals are interested in, what we call original articles, where you identify a gap, where you begin the whole process of writing a whole complete set of ideology or idea to try to contribute to that field of study. We call them original articles. So when you are submitting, for instance, when you go to the journal column and you are supposed to submit your article or manuscript, we call something original. Then we also have what we call the case report, mostly published in medical journals and other things. Then we have review. Somebody has done his work. And then, just like the name implies, when you go to Ghana in the morning on radio, we have something they call newspaper review, highlighting. Then you can also pick somebody's work and review it. Just subject the work to some scrutiny, where your ideas and the person's idea are okay, and where the person is not able to handle one or two things well, you try to contribute your other aspect to it. So it's a critical review or a critical subjecting somebody's work. So we also have that type. Then we have communications through letters, that is short articles that are to share a new development or a process. Then we also have the last, edited books. This is also very, very common. But most of the times, it is when you finish your school, you are practicing your other, then they will give you a whole topic, and then maybe you want to write on social media and COVID-19. So all experts in social media and COVID-19, you come out with a topic and you write on it. Then at the end of the day, that book is what? It is made up of different authors that is put together. So in that order, or somebody has written his book and then you want to edit and do this kind of. So basically, these are the types of publications that always come in mind when we want to publish. So before you go into publishing, you must think of the type of publication that you want to do. It is very, very important. Now, before you begin to write, you read. These are very critical 5 questions before we begin to write. What approach? You must ask this question. What approach have other authors used? What conclusions have been drawn? What is the missing gap from those approaches, method, conclusions? What can I do differently from what has already been done? And then what will be the impact of my contribution? You must always think about these things. So my brother, when I asked a question as to how we come about topics, he mentioned reading people's work. So these are some of the steps that you can decide to you can use to come out, get your topic. You try to read people's work and get the missing links. The person is not, the methodology, maybe he used survey, and then the sample size was that. So, and for that matter, you want to use other forms of research designs and other things. It all contributes to what you want to write. Now, this is what we call the research funnel. The research funnel, you see the broad idea, you review the literature, the gap in a research, then your study. Immediately you read a broad idea, somebody's paper, you read the literature again, then you find a gap, then you now narrow down to your study. You develop your research questions and then your research aim. So we mostly call this one what we call the research funnel. It's very, very important in academic publication. Now, another issue that has to do with coming out with idea has to do with brainstorming, compiling your research. When you have come out with a topic, you have decided to set your objectives, your question, your hypothesis, and everything, you must also do what we call brainstorming, compiling your research. Make and logically organize your figures, results. You must be it is very, very important. You make an outline of your manuscript. You plan the sections. Most of the times, if you want to know, because you know that you are going to write on topic A, B, C, D, you might have searched to know that journal A, journal B is into what? Social media and COVID-19. So what you do is that you try to look at their format or their plan or the sections that is involved in their writing so that you also adapt it. Now, when you finish all this, you try to answer, what is the aim of my research? After brainstorming, you ask yourself, what is the aim of your research? What do my research results show? What will it show? And what will the results mean to entire academic community? If you're able to answer this question, then you are there. Now, let's look at the structuring of your academic paper. Basically, the generally accepted structure for writing an academic paper, that may vary. It may vary from academic journal to academic journal, but basically they all include this. We have the title, the abstract, the introduction, and then the literature review are the same. Sometimes from the literature review introduction, you just go straight and then you start addressing the issue. For methodology, this in recent time, people prefer to write methods and materials, because sometimes beside the method, you need certain materials, certain things put in place in order for you to carry out your research. Methodology because methodology has to do with the scientific arrangements. Then other material has to do with the social thing that you might need, including the academic, the scientific thing that you might need to make your research. Then your research results, your discussions and conclude. Cited works of references. And then that is what is mostly recommended by most journals, as I indicated earlier, but may vary. I indicated earlier that this structure may vary, but generally that is what we normally use. Now, let's look at this. We call it the process of writing, building an article. So
hello,
please,
please, can you go over the structures again?
Now, we say the structuring of how to write an academic paper. Your academic paper has sessions. The sessions that must include in the paper. You need a title, you write an abstract. Then abstract, most of the time the abstract is just a summary of your work. So that if somebody doesn't have time to read the whole work, with the abstract, the person is able to do what you are writing. Then we have introduction, of which the literature review is part. Most journals will not prefer you to write introduction. Then when you get to another section, you write literature review, then you start. For instance, if I'm writing on social media and academic productivity, and I decide to start my introduction, maybe the next subtopic after introduction will be social media in higher institutions. So that means that from the introduction, I'm beginning my literature review. The literature review answers the questions that you have raised. The questions that you have raised, or the hypothesis that you are trying to solve, find solutions to. Your literature review is going to address them. For instance, you have identified those gaps. For instance, my first attempt or my first research question is to what extent does social media influence faculty members' academic productivity? So I want to look at academic productivity and then social media and academic productivity. That will be the subtopic after the introduction. Then straight, that means you are moving to the literature review. Then we have the methodology, we have the results. After you have done your analysis and everything, you present the results and other things. Then you move to another session and you need to discuss the results. Then works cited or references as indicated. Are you okay? Can I move on?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so if you have any question, just note it down. So this is the process. That's what I've just explained. The title, the abstract, and the keywords. Most of the time in scientific writing, the mistake most of us do is that when you come to keyword, after the abstract, if you want to keyword, people go and use the title of the words, the keywords in the title as what do you call it? As the keyword. It is very, very bad. It is one of the most reasons why most manuscripts are rejected. When you are writing an abstract, the words that are compelling within the abstract, totally different from that of the title, is what you are trying. And most of the time, the keywords are used for abstracting and indexing, for storing your work. So for instance, if you are Amma Abebrese, and then for us, I want to search a research that you have done, and you have used the keyword multiplicity, you have used another keyword, productivity. I just immediately I key in those keywords, then your name will pop up, or any person that has produced a research with those keywords will come up. It is for indexing and abstracting. So we have it that way. The introduction, unfortunately, even though the abstract, let me indicate it, even though the abstract, from the title you come to the abstract, in proper academic writing, it is the abstract that is always written at last. You write it last because it is after you finish the whole research that you do the summary. It is always written at last. So let's take that one into consideration. So that is how you build your article. Now let's look at the title. We want to dive a bit into segment, the structuring that we've mentioned. I said that effective titles attract readers. Identify the main topic, how to come about effective titles. Identify the main topic. Are informative but concise, very informative, are concise. Leave out phrases such as a study of, investigation into. If you say investigating into, it is very, these are some of the words that we use them, we have used them. Then observation on, then you avoid abbreviations and jargons. We've indicated it earlier that this is formality. In academic writing, we are talking about formality. So jargons must be left out. For instance, a research by Pivet et al. 2012 shows that articles with shorter titles are viewed and cited more frequently than those with what? Long titles. We have Knight and Ingalls, 1996. They also suggest that the maximum number of words for a title should be 16 words. So you don't go and write a very long title, more than normally, traditionally, when you most journals, they will give you the limit up to 60 words. But literature has indicated that people are comfortable with shorter titles. So these researchers also did their research and came out that for your work to be cited and be viewed and read by most people in the world, other researchers, there's a need for your titles to be very concise. You don't go and write very long sentences. Now let's look at the abstract and keywords. The abstract must be convince the reader to keep reading. That is the purpose. It must convince the reader to keep reading. Now, act as the advertisement of your paper. It advertises your paper. If I read the abstract, for instance, when we're kids, they come to show what we call it, cine. They'll come and show, they used to come and show, is it cine? No, concert. Then within the concert house, before they start, somewhere around 8, 9, between 6:30 and 7, they give us some introduction to whip your interest. So if you don't even have money, you're going to be searching through your mother's bag to get money to go because they have whipped your interest. That is what the abstract does. If you write a good abstract and somebody reads it, the person finds interest in your work and the person will go further to read. Are you okay? Then, as I indicated, it must be concise, must be written at last. Even though it is the second in terms of structuring, it must always be written at last. Let's look at the keywords. The keywords are the labels of your paper, the labels. You want to label your paper. So if you say Amake Ababrese and you just say migration in Ghana or migration, Ghana, youth, these are the keywords that the person uses. Immediately you put migration, youth, and Ghana, then these things will pop up. So they are labels. They are using for abstracting and indexing purposes. We'll look at what abstracting is. We'll look at what indexing is. They are very, very important in academic publications. Then your keywords must be very specific. Some of us go to write very long phrases and clauses are keywords. Some even use narratives. They say keywords. It can be a phrase, but it should be made up of words. Then it should include only standard abbreviations. For instance, you cannot use abbreviations that people don't know as your keyword. But if you have standard abbreviation that everybody knows, APP to represent what we call applications. It is a standard abbreviation. It means you can use it. But GTV. If GTV is not common, everybody doesn't know GTV in academia or in the world, then you can use it. It is not allowed. Now let's move on. The next thing is, what must constitute your abstract? When you are writing the abstract, this is what comes into your mind. The orientation. The orientation has to do with the angle at which you want to look at your work. The angle at which you want to look at your work. For instance, I want to do what we call a comparative study. So I'm comfortable starting with, in recent years, there has been so much public cry about the rate of poverty in Africa. So you are trying to create an orientation to buy people's mind to know that you are writing something from a particular angle or school of thought. So that is what goes into your abstract: the orientation, the research purpose, the motive of your study, the research approach or design, then your main findings and conclusions. In fact, some journals will even ask you that you have to indicate this whilst you write. Some will indicate that. So let's look at simply how to write an abstract. It is very, very important. Generally, this is what goes into an abstract. Some of the things they are optional. For instance, value added. Some journals will argue, what contribution has your work done? So you must add it in the abstract. Others don't add. You add it the other side. Now, the introduction. What goes into the introduction? The general background information. You state the field. So when you are writing, it is in the introduction that one is able to identify the field, the orientation that you are coming from. So the problem or the research question, what is the aim of the research, of your research? And then this is basically what goes into the introduction and your background. Your general information, you state your field of study, the problem, then your aim. It must be very, very explicit in your introduction. You don't get missing from there. Now, when you get to the literature review, this is one of the most important aspects of your writing. You have read people's work. You want to produce a new research on your own. But bear in mind, in reviewing people's literature, you must make sure that your work is original. And one of the yardsticks for measuring originality has to do with plagiarism. Our world has become so sophisticated that you cannot steal somebody's work. In the past, you can write and go scot-free. For your article to be accepted, immediately the editor receives it, the journal receives it. The first step is it goes through what we call plagiarism check. So for you to be very prolific in research, there's the need for you to learn how to do your literature review. Now, what goes into the literature review? Clearly state your own position of the review. Please, let's take note. The literature review, it is not just a list of literature you have read. Most of us have challenges in doing literature. It is not just a list of literature, and ABC said it, and Johnson 1992 said this, and ABC, in that order, that's what we do it. But you must understand that in your literature review, once you are trying to look at what people have done, the work that people have done is related to what you are doing, you must critique their work. You must identify your position based on what the person has written. So generally, we have one of the biggest challenges that we as students have is that when it comes to literature review, we only list, what do you call it? It is names of authors that have produced articles and write-ups on the area that we are studying. But we don't subject that work to what? The critique, trying to find a gap. So your position of the review must always be clear. That is it. So clearly organize the literature by themes. That is one of the most important things that when you are writing your literature review, you must do. Just don't write all the ideas in one. Remember, you have your research objectives. There are 4, there are 3. Organize your literature review along those 4 or 3 research questions. And these research questions are going to be your subtopics for the literature review. So for instance, if I've been reviewing a paper, I've been sent papers to review or and somebody decides to write a literature review and it just blankets, you are not able to distinguish the idea A from idea B, then I have a challenge. So your literature review must be organized in teams. And the teams that you organize your literature review must be based on your research questions, the answers that you are trying to find. Then state with a general overview of literature, go on and address the literature and relate how it relates to your research question, a specific research question. Now, when you are writing your literature review, there's always for you to also conclude. You summarize most of the important aspects of the existing literature, evaluate the current state of the literature review, then identify significant flaws or gaps in existing knowledge, and outline areas of future study. It is very, very important. It's very, very important. Then link your research to existing knowledge. You must link your research. So for instance, if you are writing, especially in the discussion segment, now I find out that women in Ghana are poor. Is my finding related to what somebody has done? It is in line with what somebody has done. I should be able to indicate it. Is my findings contributing to knowledge? Am I the first person to come out with that idea? You must let your research, it must be very clear when you are writing your research on that. So you must link your research to existing knowledge. Then use the literature as a support to what you are proposing. Now let's look at this. This is one of the most important aspects of your publication, the methodology. You must indicate whether you are going to write a paper to test a theory. You are writing a paper to approve of a theory. You must indicate it is research method. I mean, the methodology is the most important aspect because your work is grounded on the methodology. Let's assume that from introduction up to literature review, you have depended on people's work. So it means that your work in terms of publication begins from the methodology up to the conclusion. That is where you are contributing. So your methodology is very, very important. So for instance, we said that include all details required to produce your work. Details. The study site, the material, the instruments, the organism, the participants. Time of data collection, your experimental design, data sampling and handling, conceptual method, model, statistics. All these things must be included in your methodology. How did you come by your sample? How did you select the study site? All this must be indicated. So the methodology is a whole thing. If you can just decide to choose that you want to do methodology alone, it can take us a whole semester or more to understand what research methodology is. This is just an introduction to have an idea as to how we can write our papers. Now, for instance, if you are writing a paper to prove a theory under the methodology, what do you do? These are the questions that you must always be guiding you when you are writing under your methodology. Does the manuscript make any theoretical position? For instance, your manuscript must always be written in context of a theoretical position. For instance, if those of us in the media and communication, we have something called uses and gratification. I'm writing on how Ghanaian women like watching Pragya or what, how they like watching Kunkumbaji. Now, my research is going to be written within a theoretical position of uses and gratification. Uses and gratification just means that something that you consume and then you get pleasure out of it. So that is your theoretical, does the manuscript make its theoretical position very clear? And does it critically engage with alternative theoretical perspectives? Is your theoretical positioning, is it engaging with other thoughts? Then does the manuscript draw on constructs and theories from literature in social and political psychology, whilst remaining open to other disciplines? So there must always be a link. For instance, you are writing on communication, and by the time you realize there is something in pure science that is very, very important for you to relate your work to. So your theoretical position must always not be in isolation. You must relate it. Does your manuscript consider the historical, political, social, cultural context, the shapes of the research questions and findings? You must look at it, especially under the methodology. Now, when you are writing an empirical research, what does the word empirical means? Can someone help us? Can we have any idea? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Okay, let's go on. Yes, any idea on empirical?
Experimental.
Okay, so that's it. Something experimental, something that is detailed. So you want to write a research on that. So these are some of the things that you must also consider in your manuscript. They are very, very clear. Are the methods and the analytical procedures appropriate? Are they thoroughly and transparently documented and justified? For quantitative research, are the data, instruments, and analysis scripts provided? Or does the manuscript give justification why this is impossible or what? Inadvisable? Is the selection of participants justified for the research questions, examined, and then the conclusion drawn? These are some of the things that you must always consider. So for instance, if you write a manuscript and it goes in for a review, these are some of the questions that the reviewers are asked to review your work based on. So for instance, I can be given a template to review your work, and these are the questions they try to see whether you have satisfied this. So it is very, very important for you to look at that aspect. Now, it continues. Are there limitations and other things? So this is just under the methodology. Our limitations, so we say that as the continuation of the empirical, ecological, validity, generability, what they call the possibility for casual references, distribution of key variables, all these things must be stated in your methodology. In a single study, the manuscripts reporting quantitative, what do you call it, data. Is it empirical? Is the empirical evidence and the quality of the data sufficient enough to warrant your publication? Some of us use just about 2 or 3 human beings for research. There must be justification why, there must be literature to support why you are using only 2 people for your research. Other than that, it cannot be considered. So there must always be justification for every step that you take, especially under the methodology. Now, after you have done your methodology, you have come out with your research questions. Those who are into qualitative and quantitative, other things, they put them into questionnaire and other things. It depends on the type of interviews. You now put them into your SPSS and those kind of stuff. You run them. Then you get what we call the results and the findings. How many women participated? What is the percentage of women that participated? How many men? What is the percentage? What are their educational background, the demographics? All those things must come in, depending on what you are studying. Then all your findings and results are put together, and then you discuss them. So for instance, under the results and findings, you describe the results obtained from your methods, the method that you've used. Organize around your figures. So most of the time you refer to figures, tables, pie chart, and those kind of stuff. That is what we use, depending on what type of paper you are writing. Then you indicate the statistical significance. Statistical significance. If the percentage of the women is 30%, and that of the men is 30%. Does this variation have any statistical significance on your work? You must always indicate them. Then avoid repeating information from your data. It is one of the things that we always like avoiding. Something is on the table and you come to the data and you come to the narration and you are repeating the same thing. It is not advisable. For separate results and discussion session, no interpretation in the results session. They must be separate results and discussion session. After you have gotten the result, the tables are there. Everything is there for anybody to see. You move to another session for what we call discussion session, where you discuss. You don't do interpretation. No interpretation of results in that session. So interpretation of the results are done when you put a table there, you do the interpretation, you do the table, you do the interpretation. Then you move ahead. Wherever you get to the discussion sessions where you need to discuss what you have come out with. Now, another important aspect has to do with the structuring the discussion. You must plan your paragraphs. For instance, some of us just write because we want to write. Then each paragraph you have one central theme. Remember, you did your analysis based on your research questions and they were in themes and tables. Now you come to the discussion segment. Your literature review was also done on themes. Those discussions when you come to the discussion session, those discussions must be done based on the central themes. Some will prefer that you put them under sub-themes, but others will write them free writing, but each paragraph might contain a central idea. So let's take note of that. Then each paragraph you have a concluding sentence leading to the topic. So if you take paragraph 1, you have found out that the women are more than men. You have done your discussion. Now you must conclude that paragraph before you move on to the next paragraph. What is the implication of that paragraph? You don't leave it hanging. So it is very, very important. Consider the logic of the start and the end of your sentences. Don't leave the sentences hanging. What is the implication of women being more than men on your discussions? So you must always make that very clear. Then the discussion must also remind the reader of the research questions. Remember, I indicated earlier, being addressed or the hypothesis being tested. Tell the reader what you want them to get from the data. You must indicate. Then you state which different, state which different are significant, which difference are significant. It's very, very important. Or highlight the important trend and the comparisons. In the discussion, you are doing important trend and comparison. For instance, I did a work and then I realized that maybe my finding was very unique. And the finding was that the academic community in Ghana don't want to research because they are not able to go on the internet. And the reason is that data is very expensive in Ghana. Assuming that I did the research and then I came out with this finding. You must indicate whether this is an important thing that you have come out with or there are other literature that have reported on a similar thing. So it's very, very important. You indicate whether the hypothesis is supported, rejected, or partially supported. When you are using hypothesis, you either, after you come out with your discussions, your hypothesis can either be supported. For instance, women like lying. Excuse me to use that word. So that is your hypothesis. After you finish your research, does your research support the fact that women lie? Does your research reject that position or partially? So it is important you make use of that. Then the last aspect of our manuscripts has to do with the conclusions. You give your conclusion, you answer the question. This is where your answers to your questions are made, the conclusion. Restate most of the important findings. For instance, you did a finding and you had some sterling, you did a research and you had a very important finding. You need to indicate it, highlight it in the conclusion, you restate it. You state the implication of your work. Now, every research that we do have implications. Now, we either do research to advise policy decision, to come out with a new conceptual framework, or to contribute to a new field of study or an existing field of study. So you must state your implication. Your work, does it going to affect, is it going to have political, economic, any implication that your work is bringing forth? You must indicate it. You just don't leave your work hanging because you are contributing to knowledge. If you are looking at women empowerment, there must be economic implications of women empowerment. There can be religious implication. There can be political implications. So your research should be able to address this in the conclusion. Then you give suggestions. So research will give suggestions. That is the reason why when you are reading, get a topic, maybe the suggestions is what you take. Okay. Now, important note, after you have finished, assuming that we have finished writing this, there is very, very important thing that we do. If you finish writing, let's don't deceive ourselves that we are born and bred with English language. So it is important that your language must be very, 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 very excellent, impeccable. So after you finish your manuscript, it is important you look at the language. Unfortunately for us, this time, the human element is almost going out. So for instance, if you write, your poor language can lead to rejection of your paper. If the need arises, some of the journals also employ what we call the editing services. They'll ask you to bring your work for editing, then you pay at a fee. Or you use this all-important app. You subscribe. For instance, I subscribe for 1 year. Every year I renew. When I write my work, you do the basic grammatical check. You go to premium. You go to premium grammatical check, and immediately you send your work there. Your work is okay. So it is very important that when you finish your manuscript, assuming that you have finished writing everything, the language is very, very important. Let us not be deceived that we have control over somebody else's language. Now, when you are writing your thesis, let's look at these important pointers. When you are writing the content of your thesis, we have finished writing. Let's look at them. Now, emphasize contrast using the following ways. For instance, if you are contrasting an idea, two ideas, you must make use of the following pointers. For instance, however, nevertheless, in your conclusion, yet, despite, in spite, it is very, very important that we indicate those things when we are trying to compare ideas. It's very, very important. Then, add emphasis. When we are adding emphasis, undoubtedly, indeed, my work has contributed to women empowerment. Obviously, admittedly, or particularly, let's make the work. When you are writing that manuscript, you must make sure that the language is flowing freely, and as much as possible, you must use all the connectors and the important pointers. Then, to show cause, for instance, you are writing something to show cause because and those kind of stuff, we are aware of them. Then compare data, especially in the discussion, in the results aspect. You need to compare data. You use the following: similarly, likewise, and those kind of stuff. So let's look at them. Now, one of the most important part of our writing process has to do with acknowledging sources. You write your work within academia. What it is believed is that your work can be authoritative if your work is able to be you're able to support your work with what already exists in literature. So citations are very, very, very important of our work. Very, very important. That's why we call it academic writing. Very, very important. So for instance, if you are beginning a sentence and you want to cite, you can say the Miracle 2020 argued that, dash and that. According to this person, 2020, dash and that, are shown in a study conducted. You must make sure that your reading of your work becomes very interesting and balanced. Now, tips for in-text referencing. One of the challenges that we have has to do with referencing. So when you are doing referencing, it is very, very important that we have what we call in-text and what? The referencing itself. Now, insert an in-text reference whenever your work has been influenced by somebody else. So a statement that somebody has said, you have decided to put a statement in a particular form. That statement is not from you. It must always be supported. This must be, your statement have been influenced. So there's the need for you to support that. Other than that, you can be caught for plagiarizing somebody's work. So in an in-text citation, it consists of author's name, the year of publication. For instance, you say that Criswell, 2020. Now, the author's sign name and year of publication, we mentioned the footnote at the end is also providing details on the publication. The page numbers on the directions of the code, everything is very, very important when you are doing in-text citation, depending on the type of referencing that you are going to use. So I indicated that before you even start writing, there's a need for you to relate your work to that of the journal and know that the type of referencing that they use. So for instance, are they using APA, C47, and then Chicago, Harvard, and the rest? There's a need for you to understand all this referencing stuff because each journal has got a particular referencing style that it adapts. It is only a few that will tell you that, oh, make sure that your referencing is consistent. They won't tell you A or B, but it might be consistent. But the facts will remain that most of them, about 99% of them, will indicate the type of citation they want you to do. So you need to master all these forms of citation when you are writing your work. So tips for what they call in-text referencing. For instance, the style, the guide of the reference can be what accessed on the website, for instance, of the journal. Before you start writing, you go and then access it. Then you create a reference style. You can create it via this. The Zotero bar. It is very easy. The Mendeley desktop. Very, very, it has made referencing so interesting that this time you just need to master and understand how those things are done and you are okay. Then your reference list should include information such as the author's name, the year of publication, the title of the books and the rest. So when you come to those things, it is very, very important. So this is how the Mendeley look like. If you download it, all the paper that you have read, you create folders for them, you put them here, and then you generate your citations. It becomes very, very easy. If you are writing within the text, you just put the pointer there, you go to your Word document, you cite the person, and you move ahead. This is also what we call the Zotero. It is also used for citation. It's very, very important. So maybe in future, we can do only referencing if we begin to understand how publication is done. Because a lot of papers are rejected because of what? Publications. Referencing. Now, we have finished our paper. Now, how do you prepare your paper for publication? Let's look at the last aspect. I think this is the last aspect of our presentation. How to prepare your article for publication. Re-examine your article. What is it unique or is it unique? After your draft is ready, leave it for a few days. Leave it for a few days. Don't be in a hurry. When you write, you must leave it for a few days and revisit it. If you revisit it, for instance, you begin to identify new errors emerging. Then, if you have any software for plagiarism, you must check it because it is one of the first criteria. Most of my papers I do is 2%, 1%, 4%. The highest paper I have ever published, then it was accepted was 5%. That means my work was 95% original. Some will give you up to 10%, but most journals don't tolerate that. So plagiarism is very, very important. You need to check your plagiarism level before you even send your work out. Ensure that your arguments are logical. You must make consistent and logical arguments. Then you must also have your article edited and proofread. I've made it clearly. Those times we have people that could do it on our behalf. But fortunately for us, the world has grown to the stage that you can subscribe. Almost 900 RMB, you subscribe for the whole year. And any time you do your work, you put it on the Grammarly. The Grammarly will scan everything, do the necessary corrections. You go through yourself and then you make sure that the right thing is done. Now, how to choose the right journal? Please, let's pay attention here. It is very, very important. Now, Indicators for a good quality journal. Choose the journal that publishes articles in your field of study. One of the mistakes that we make as students is that we just pick any topic and start writing on. If from your bachelor's, when you get your master's degree, you have to begin to tailor your work towards a particular field of study. Now, if you go to Ghana right now, for instance, before you are employed at a university, we call something alignment. The alignment means that either it should be 3/3 or 2/3. 1/3 will not be allowed. Your master's, your bachelor's, your master's, and your PhD, they are the same. Or your bachelor's and master's are the same. Or your master's and your PhD are the same. So you must begin to align yourself with a particular field of study. So you publish article in your field of study. Somebody is doing environmental science, or somebody is doing biology, and the person is busy publishing on social media or in communication, something different. Please, if you are doing that, it must have impact on your academic progress. I mean, your research progress. You are a scholar in a particular field of study, and as such, you must be recognized. So all your publications must come around that side. Then, another question you ask yourself is the journal a peer review one? Peer review means that when your work is sent out, it is sent out to an anonymous, specialists, scholars in that particular field of study to subject your work to scrutiny before a feedback is given. So when you go to the website of the journal, see whether it's a peer review journal. Then another very important thing in choosing a journal has to do with the impact factor. The impact factor. Is the journal contributing to knowledge? If it's contributing more to knowledge, there's a classification for it. We have high impact, medium, and low. Then, sponsored by Learning Society. One of the indicators of what a good journal is for you to be able to verify. For instance, Ghana Journal, Journal of Medical Association. If you go there and this particular journal is sponsored by the Medical Journal Association, it means that it is a recognized journal. If a UN is sponsoring a particular journal, it is a recognized journal. So that is one of the areas that you must always look at it. Then you must also look at the editorial board. It is very, very important. Even though people are putting false information about people, very, very distinguished people in the world as being part of editorial board, you can always cross-check these things. Then you must also check the rejection rate. Any journal that accepts any paper that comes its way, you have to be suspicious of that journal. Out of 100%, a good journal should be able to reject about 70 to 80% of the work. A good journal, that is what most literature are saying. Then you must also consider what we call the frequency of exclusion in indexes. There are a lot of indexes. It's just like an award system, grading system. Is the journal you are publishing being included in the league of indexing? It is very, very important that we look at that. Now, these are some of the international abstracting and indexing things we have. For instance, we have what we call the ISI. We have the Scientific Citation Index. Those of us in social science, we have the Social Science SSCI. We have the ICE, Humanity and Citation Index. We have the Google Scholar. We have the Scopus. We have the Web of Science. We have expanded Web of Science, Social Science expanded, and then Emerging Source Citation Index. So there are a lot. But these are the most accredited ones. When you go into the sciences, they have a group of citation and abstracting institutions that are in charge of their work. So you need to look at this, whether your article is, most of the times, the unfortunate thing is that most of the journals these days, most of them fix some of these things, but you can just always cross-check. If you cross-check and you don't belong to any of this, you can decide to do what? To call your manuscript back. Now, you must also look at whether the journal has what we call international influence. If just within a particular country and those particular group of people are publishing there, the same group of people day in and day out, then you have to be suspicious. It is very, very important. selecting a journal is very, very important in your academic writing. Then please be careful of many fake indexing services. They have a lot of fake indexing services. If you are not sure of the journal that you are publishing, you want to see whether the journal is well indexed and abstracted, there's a way of finding it. There's a link down there. It is very, very easy for you to find it. So let's pay attention to that. Now, this is one of my area of interest. Last week, I did a presentation on predatory publishers. These are a group of people that open another way of scamming. That is where the scamming level has gotten to. Our people are busy scamming white and taking their money. People have also decided to go into the academia and pick people's money. So they open websites claiming to be publishers, and then they demand money from people. When you send your work is not subjected to any scrutiny. They only wait after a week or two, and then your work is published. So you need to be very, very careful of what we call the predatory, what they call publisher. They are there in the system. You just be there, and then they'll send you a mail, especially those that are publishing and your emails are out there. They'll send you a mail, bring your work for it to be published. There's a need for you to be very, very, very careful about this thing. They'll ask you, you come and pay for your money, your manuscript to be what? Published within a week or a day, or they do a lot of things. So it is important that you pay attention to this. If you can go to the net, go and read. There are lists of journals that falls under this category. Then, checklist for manuscript subscription. If you want to submit your manuscript, what are the things that you must consider? You must consider the length. Most journals will give you the length. Most of the SSCI journals, 5,000, 6,000. Some will give you 8,000. So the maximum I've seen around the SSCI journal is about 9,000. So the word count is very, very important. If you don't check your word count and send it, it will be what? Unsubmitted. Then the figures, the tables and references, we must look at all these things. Then the format of your figures. Each journal has a format, how your figures are positioned, all your tables are. We must check all these things before we send it. Then spelling conventions. You must check the spelling convention. There are some journals that accept British and America. Some accept British and America. Others accept only British. Others accept only America. So let's look at them. Look at the tips. Prepare emails from cover letter to the editor-in-chief. Sometimes it is optional. It doesn't count. It is optional. People see as optional. Then you also have include information not typically mentioned in the manuscript. When you are writing, for instance, under your cover letter, you can mention some of these things. Then some of the journals will also require that you also suggest people to review your work. Then one of the things that we must always avoid collaborators or people at your institution always. For instance, if I want to review my paper and I send it to my supervisor, or I suggest my supervisor as a reviewer, the person is going to be biased when the work is sent to the person. So your work must not come as quality as you want. So let's take note of that. Now, the time frame. Most of the time when you send your journal out, it takes about a month, more months. For instance, I sent a paper out in June. I've not heard anything. They say under review, up to date. So maximum between 3 months and 6 months. Your paper must go through a process. If you send a paper out there and the next day the paper is published, you have to doubt the credibility of that journal. Within a month, they have finished everything. No. Very good journals go through what we call, some go single review, others go double peer review. And maximum number of months they give to a reviewer is 4 months. 4 weeks. Then when it comes, it goes through a lot of processes. Are you okay? Then locate 2 experts or reviewers in your field of study and those kind of stuff. These are not so much important. Then you'll send your article for review. Now inform you about, when you send your article for review, they'll inform you either your article has been accepted or rejected. And in fact, there's one thing about publication that I have made me so much interested and grow in publication. That has to do with rejection. Yes, a couple of my papers have been rejected all the time. And then these rejections come with recommendations. So I capitalize on these recommendations that I had from various journals, about 3 or 4 papers. When you write, they'll tell you methodologically this and that, and then you put them together. It is through this rejection that will prepare you. So if you write a paper and that paper goes out, all the time your papers are being published, you have to be, there must be cause of worry. Either a thorough work is not done or something is being compromised. At each point in time, you cannot be 100% right. So it is rejection. Quite frankly, my first 2 attempts in publication, I was rejected. And the recommendation was what I picked and inputted and sent it to a different journal. It was published. So you send it out, it is rejected. You send it out, it is rejected. The recommendations come. Then you input the recommendations. So very soon, your weaknesses will become what your strength. So when you send your paper for peer review, when they send it for peer review, there are these options that you have. Either your paper will come with minor revisions, major revisions, most of the time with major revisions, or rejection. And when the rejection comes, please, brothers and sisters, never, I'm now immune to it. And the more you are rejected, the more you pick people's idea and make your manuscript rich. So with time, you become an expert in whatever you are doing. So basically, this is a brief introduction to academic publication. Thank you very much for listening. If we have any questions, any input, suggestions, let's ask. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity.
Thank you too, Mr. Demuyako, for your insightful lesson. Okay, as you already said, we'll move straight to the question and answers. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat section, or you just simply raise your hand and we'll give you the platform to ask your questions. Yeah, so if you have any questions, you could just unmute yourself, or you raise your hand, or you type it in the chat section. Okay, I'll go first. Mr. John, how can you determine if a methodology is no longer contributing to knowledge? Should I take the question again? How can you determine if a methodology is no longer contributing to knowledge?
Your methodology, I'm not getting your question right. You mean your methodology is not contributing to knowledge or the whole work?
No, the methodology.
Yes, with the methodology.
How can I determine if it's no longer contributing?
That is why I indicated under the methodology that, you see, in academic writing, every step of the academic process or academic publication must be justified. Are you okay? So basically, for instance, your theoretical positioning, your methodological positioning we don't know your theoretical position, whether you are a positivist, whether you are that, you're a pragmatist. What is your research position? So all those ideas must come out when you are writing. You are using quantitative and qualitative, or you are using only qualitative. If you are using only qualitative, there must be a research position that you are taking. If you are using only quantitative, there must be a research position. If you are missing the method, qualitative and quantitative, it means that there must be what? A research position. So at every point in time, your work, your research must have an orientation. And this orientation must be justified by what we call existing literature. For instance, why have you chose to use mixed method instead of only quantitative method? Are you okay? Now, what do you call John Christwell will tell you that the mixed method will give the researcher the opportunity to capitalize on the strength of both qualitative and quantitative to make their research solid. So if you are choosing qualitative and quantitative, there must be justification for choosing it. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
So basically, the research, the methodology is very, very important. I just indicated that it's a whole area that one must understand before you start writing. That is why in contemporary time, we talk about methodology and what? Materials. So now it's not just a scientific procedure alone. It's not that a scientific procedure. For instance, research design, sampling, that and that and that and that, and you just go. Now you can do a narration. And that each procedure must be related to your work, and there must be justification. I hope I'm okay. You are okay?
Yeah, yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm okay. The next question is, what is the limit to the number of include in a literature review? From Millicent. Hello?
Hello?
The next question was, what is the limit to the number of sources to include in a literature review?
Most of the time, original researches, some based on the journal that you are writing to. Some journal will require a minimum of 30 more referencing. And those references must be from SSCI, AHCI, they will indicate. So that is why I am saying that it's a whole thing. You must read to understand the tenets of the journals where you are sending your work. You must understand it. But for original manuscript, it will require that a minimum of 30 citations are made. And out of that 30 citation, about 65 to 70% must come from top journals, journal with high impact factor. So you just don't go and pick any roadside journal and cite it in an original way. It will be rejected. So the number of citations in the literature review may vary. For instance, in a PhD thesis, you are supposed to write, in my school, we write 100,000 words. Now, with this 100,000 words, your literature review can take, that is going to take a heavy chunk of your work. And if you are going, it means that you are going to need no less than 200 plus referencing. But for academic publication, they say 30 minimum. Most of the literature I've read, most of the journals will tell you 30. Others 40, but it should not be less than that, depending on the type of paper you are writing. But for original, I said that it must always be more than 30. And most of them must come from top journals, not just any roadside journal.
Oh, thank you. Frank has a question. Frank, you can unmute yourself, please.
All right. Please, I want to find out if there is any high impact factor journal that is free so that we can publish. Is there anyone available?
It is, my brother, thank you very much. It is one of the challenge that most of us, I wanted to mention, it escaped me. In choosing a journal, we have what we call open access. Now, the open access have two forms. We have what we call gold open access and green open access. Now, the gold open access, it means that the one publishing has a sponsor to pay for the publication fee. Then, the green open access is that your work will be published, but the journal has to subscribe, keep your work and subscribe it to people to have access to it. So most of the top high impact factor journal, when you are publishing there, you have options. It is on to you to choose. Are you okay?
Yes.
You are going to choose. For instance, if I am being sponsored by maybe, let me say, Scholarship Secretariat of Ghana, it means that my research must be available to everybody to read. Then the Scholarship Secretariat of Ghana will employ me that I choose open access gold. The open access gold, it means that when you go on the net, that particular document is going to be free of charge. So most of the high impact factor, that is the challenge that people face. As a beginner, I've always told people that if you need to publish in a high impact factor for academic recognition, for instance, as a requirement in your PhD or master's, you can choose one impact factor journal and publish there, so that that particular one is taken, or two or is taken, or three is taken. But if you want access to recognition, if you want to be recognized as a person in the field of study, in that particular field of study, there's a need for you to do more of the green open access, where people can easily have your work and cite. I did some work in May on online, what they call COVID-19 and online learning. It is on ResearchGate. It is on Google citation. I publish in an open access journal. Now, when you go to Google citation, 14 people today. When I check, 14 people have cited my work in various parts of the world. Some would send you a mail and ask you, can you send us your questionnaire for us to do a similar, including professors. So the more you publish in the open access journal, then your recognition worldwide. But if you're a beginner, you go and publish in a subscribed journal where people cannot buy your work to look at it, study, it becomes a challenge. So those selections, it is your prerogative. If somebody is being sponsoring you, or someone is being sponsoring you, and the person demands that you make your work open access, you do that. Other than that, your work will be published. They will only give you a copy, but you cannot circulate that copy for anybody else. You cannot make it public. Because when you breach that contract, you can be sanctioned. They will give you the author. They give you the author one. They'll give you the author. They'll just give you the author one copy, but that copy must not be made public for everybody to consume. Thank you.
Please, just a follow-up question.
Zach,
I don't know if I can go on.
Frank, you can go ahead.
All right. You made mention about the length of words. I tried one. Unfortunately, it was rejected. But I realized that the number of counts getting from the journal was different from the one I was having in Word document. So there was this disparity. Always, when they ask me input this, I just copy it and then paste. But I realized that the one from Word document was always ahead of the one from the journal. What may account for that disparity?
We call your work is called manuscripts. Now, that manuscript consists of two parts. The manuscript with the author's details. It means from the title page to the abstract to the main work. Now, if you want the work count, you start from the introduction. So you separate it. For instance, when you are filling the form, when you go to the journal, you are filling the form, there's a column for what do you call it? Abstract. Is that not it?
Yeah.
So you cut and paste the abstract. It means that in the main, what's the name? In the main manuscript, that abstract must not be part.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yes.
So the word count is right from the introduction to the referencing. Are you okay? That is the reason why. Another secret is that because we are not able to get the right number, when they say the minimum, the maximum is 10,000, please write up to 8,000 words or 9,800, so that it will take care of the short, what do you call it, the gap. But if you write more than what is required and they put in their system, then it will indicate it a different thing altogether.
Okay, in my case, it was about the abstract. They requested for 500. I copied the abstract to a different Word document file, and then I edited and I got exactly 500. But when I sent to the column at the journal portal, it was around 700. And I was wondering why.
That is why I say that they have their count, and you must also activate your word count in your Word. So to take care of that disparity, please always write, when they say 500, write 400.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
It is one of the basic things that some people have those challenges. Your work will be sent and then it will be unsubmitted. It will be unsubmitted because they have programmed their server that immediately the number of words count is more than what we require. Disallow the person. So that is it. Thank you.
Thank you too. Zach, you can go ahead, please. Zach, you said you have a question. Oh, Gideon, you can go ahead. You also have a question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Miracle, I want to know the difference between publishing in a journal and publishing for conferences, and what are the advantages over the other? And especially for conferences, how do you identify and publish for conferences? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, my brother. With conferences, for instance, if, for instance, my department is organizing a conference, then it means that the department has a journal to which they want to publish the work. You must understand those things. If the conference has a place at which after that they publish the work, then you must write all your documents according to the specifications of that particular journal, even though it's a conference paper. But if the conference is just for you to present and you are interested in publishing your work afterward, it means that after the conference, there's a need for you to identify a journal, go by the tenets of those journals, and then publish your work there. So basically, a conference, the conference will tell you that, for instance, early this year, I participated in a conference in Australia. We call it International Communication Association, ICA. Now, they have a journal, a lot of journals that they have. So the requirement was that our conference papers were going to be published there. So I was writing my papers based on the specification of ICA journals. But if the conference, the work that you have presented in the conference, you feel that the work has contributed a lot, and there's a need for you to do what? To publish it elsewhere, then you'd have to look at the standard of those particular, that conference, that journal, and then you rewrite your work, you restructure it to conform with that. Are you okay, my brother? Hello? The issue about the conference, yes, the conference serves two purposes. For instance, if you present at a conference, some of them, your work will be subjected to what we call a peer review by your colleagues, working groups. So where there are issues about your presentation, they will raise those issues, you input them before they do the final publication. So to me, I would say that writing for conferences is a bit, the conferences guideline must always come. They will give you alongside the guideline. But the question you must always ask yourself, are the guidelines within the framework of that conference, and after that, the conference has a place where you can publish it work, or you are going to publish in a different, so you do it according to the conference guidelines. Then when you finish and you want to publish it, you look at it from the journal's guideline. I think that is what I have to say.
All right, thank you. Max said he has a question. So you can go ahead, Max.
Yeah, hello, please, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. John, for the wonderful presentation. I'm really grateful. It's quite unfortunate, some of us, when we started 3 years ago, we didn't get such an insight. I think I have 2 questions and then I have some input. My first question, in your presentation, you did mention about the statistical analysis, but you didn't emphasize on it. I think in many research journals, that they may ask you to indicate which statistical method that you use, and even the software that you use, whether you use SPSS or you use GraphPad. So will it be okay if you can explain a little bit more on the statistical analysis and the kind of method that you use, and what you are supposed to do in that area? And I think my second question also be, I'm doing a research in bone marrow transplant. And my first publication, when I submitted, they rejected and they requested for uh, um, an illustration of the research method that I did. They requested that I put it in a form of an illustration, either in a diagram or in a pathway illustration. And when I did that, they accepted it. So is this also very important? And do you have any suggestions like softwares? Because when I read online, I just came across Paint and Inkscape. I don't know in your field of work if there's any software beside Inkscape and Paint and maybe PowerPoint, if there's any suggestions that you can give it to us that we can use to design our diagram or illustration. Thank you very much. So that is my question. Thank you.
Okay. For instance, with the last question, your last question has to do with the conceptual framework. Most of the time, it's part of the methodology. So you were coming out with a new concept, and they needed you to put it in the form of a diagram to give a clear representation of what you are doing. So I think you did it right. In terms of statistical analysis, I think it is a whole thing that we need to find time, and then we'll get some expert to take us through that process. Because that whole methodology, I indicated that methodology alone is a whole thing on its own. So this time constraint wouldn't have allowed me to go how you can come. I think there's somebody who is going to talk about how to design questionnaire and analysis and those kind of stuff. But in terms of statistical methods, it differs from journal to journal. Some will just will require that you indicate, for instance, in your analysis, you indicate how the analysis was done. So you have sample size, you have study size, you have sample size, sample technique. You go to data collection, data analysis. What they just need you to do is that at each stage of this methodology, you must indicate the practical step that you took to reach where you are. So for instance, if you are doing content analysis and you say that you do coding, maybe the data was collected through Question Pro, then transported to SL. The SL, you did the coding, transport to SSPS, and came out with chart and this and that and that. So you have to indicate those things. But as I mentioned, it differs from journal to journal. But the point, what we must understand, those methodologies are always required. We need to indicate the practical steps that we took in order to get to wherever we have gotten to. So I think maybe in future, for us to have a practical understanding of this whole thing, especially referencing and the methodology, there's a need for maybe the academic community to think about the future, how it's a whole thing on its own. We get people from qualitative background. I am a purely qualitative researcher with a bit of quantitative. So certain times I'm handicapped in the quantitative aspect, but I'm always trying my best to get the practical way of doing it. Then I think my brother, that is what I can say about what you are asking for. But I think we have to find time so that if we are going to do a workshop on statistical method, I think it is going to help a lot to give us an insight as to how to go by it. But as I indicated in my presentation, every step of your methodology must be explicit and must be substantiated, must be justified. It is very, very important.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. John. Okay, so I think I have an input. One brother asked a
Okay.
question about the word count, that when he
Okay.
was publishing his article about the
Yeah.
abstract, they requested for
Okay.
500 words, and then
Yes.
he did it, but when he put it in their general website, it was more than that. I think I also face a similar, and the problem could be
Okay.
due to the alignment and then the spacing. When you are
Yes.
writing your article, the manuscript in Word, you have to choose alignment and spacing, and usually some of us, we use 1.15 or 1.2, 1.5. Now, most of the journals, the software that they have
Frequent.
designed online, if it is
Yeah.
1.0 and you use 1.15 or 1.5, the space in between, they will count it as a word. I don't know if I'm
As a
making
way.
sense. Yes, they will
No, no,
count
it's
it.
right. You are very right.
You'll count it as a word. So when I encountered that problem, what I did was I searched online for software for accurate word counting, and I'm sending their website. Things it can be useful. So when you
Okay.
do this one will automatically give the online alignment and the spacing, and this will give you the accurate word count. So in
That's
case
great.
we face any problem like this, we shouldn't depend on only Microsoft Word for the word count. Let's use different software to get an accurate word count before we upload the manuscript on
Thank you so much.
the journal. Thank
Wow.
you.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother.
Zach, do you still have the question or you are clear now? If you still have the question, you can unmute yourself. I think there's a question in the comment section. Divine wants to know if there is a website that displays predatory journals.
If there's a website that does what?
That displays the predatory.
Yes, we have something called a dictionary. You should look for dictionary of open access journals. When you type that in a Google, you find the journals that are open access.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Any more questions, please?
Yes.
Please.
All right. Please, my question about sometimes we watch television, we listen to radio commentary and other stuff. So there are some informations from experts that we're listening to that are mostly useful for our right type. So in that instance, do I have to reference them or I can just go ahead and then put them in the literature?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm saying that sometimes we listen to radio, we watch television, and then the radio discussion or the program, some information from it may be very useful for our right type. So in that case, do I have to?
You paraphrase them. You paraphrase them. You paraphrase them. But if they are information of facts, are you okay? If they
Yeah,
are information of fact, if you are reporting on facts, you will need to get literature to back it.
yeah.
Are you okay?
The issue is, currently I'm working on the Ghana Education Service last year's their curriculum reform. You know, there was this argument between the political parties as against the civil society organizations. So I'm writing and a paper on it, and there are some commentaries that I've picked from radio and then television, from YouTube and other media stations. So I'm just finding it difficult as to how I can reference them.
When you are doing academic writing, the issue of formality comes in. Now, what they are discussing, there must be some form of formal documentation to whatever discussion that is going on. So you can only make referencing to those those what do you call it? Those documents related to that topic. Other than that, whatever somebody says, you need to paraphrase it.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Yes. You
All right.
paraphrase
Thank
it,
you.
then you can credit the person in terms of, according to Mr. So and so on this and that 24th on GT, the person said it. You are crediting the person. That one that doesn't necessarily mean you come through the reference.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Paraphrasing and
Thank you
quoting.
very much, Mr. Damiako. Any more questions, please? Hello, any more questions? Okay, so I think so this session is exhausted for now. We don't have any more questions, but if you do have questions after the section, you can contact Mr. Damiako later on. Mr. John, do you have any last words for us, please?
Oh, what I would like to say is that a few thoughts of mine with you people. It's been an honor. I want to thank the organizers for granting me this opportunity to share with you my experience in publication. But what I would like to encourage our people is that let publications be part and parcel of our lives. Whether you are within the academia, you are within the corporate world, you need to contribute in your own small way to knowledge construction. Let's keep on reading, read broadly. We can do a lot. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, when you go to Africa, we don't like reading, we don't research. Whilst others are devoting 45%, 30% of their GDP into research. If you look at Ghana's research percentage per GDP, it is very appalling. So I would like to encourage us that we should continue doing. It's an act. For instance, it's an act. The more you do it, the more you become used to it. As I speak to you, I have seven papers in various stages of review process, from SACI journals and other things. 7. Whilst I read broadly, the ideas come. I'll just be putting the ideas together. So it becomes part and parcel of you. You just write. You just write. So let's get used to it. Let's read it. Let's continue reading. Let's share the idea. And more importantly, networking. It is very, very important. Let's continue to network. In academia, don't think about challenges. You don't want to challenge compete with anyone. Let's network. Where's the need for you to contact somebody, for the person to support you, there's a need for you to do that. So please, thank you very much once again for the opportunity. I'm hoping that we'll continue to engage ourselves after here. Thank you.
Yeah, please, kindly hold on. I think Frank has a last question for you. Frank. Hello, Frank.
Hello, can you hear
Hello,
me?
Frank. Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. Sir, you mentioned high impact factor journals and then that of low factor impact factor journals. Can you please update us as to the number? Maybe 2 is low, 3 is high, and that stuff. Can you help us with that?
It is just the average. For instance, it's like accreditation. When you go to Ghana, for instance, we have something called National Accreditation Board. Now, if you take Minister of Health, if you want to establish a school, that is related to health, you need some clearance from Minister of Health. Is that not it? So when it comes to health, for instance, all the health institutions, they will go what we call a league, the high performing ones to the low performing ones. When you go to maybe education, the high performing, the medium, and then the poor performing one, and the low performing one. So the impact factor, they are just averages, the total number of what you call publication and how often people have cited them on the average. So sometimes it start from 0 point something up to 5, up to 6. It can go as much as you can. So there's no limit to it, but it depends on how often people are citing, referring to that journal. The low impact factors, it means that in a year, for instance, in a year, just a few people cite those journals. It means when your work go there and it is not in open access, it becomes very difficult for your work to be seen. But the advantage is that when you, in the high impact factor journals, because already they have that recognition. One time I illustrated like a child that completed BECE gets admission to one of the top secondary schools in Ghana, and the person is already concluding that, oh, my university entrance is 100%. No. So those, they have made a name for themselves through the series of work that they have done. Then people are referring to them now and then. People are citing them. That is how come their recognition is going high, high, high. So that means they are impacting on the society on research. So basically that is what happens. So it depends on where you are abstracting or indexing, where you belong to. So when you go to Ministry of Health, for instance, I use an example, they have their grading. You go to education, they have their grading. You go to this outside, they have their grading. So they have different institutions that does the grading. So SSCI, they have their impact factor. When you go to, what do you call it? Emerging source, they have their impact factor. So it depends on the number of citations that one gets.
Yeah, please, just a quick one. I'm told that sometimes the journals, they fake the impact factor journals on their website. Is there any way to validate the impact factor on the website?
I just indicated to you that, for instance, if I want to attend Chief Praso Nursing Training College, the first thing I have to do as a student who is curious is to find out whether that school is credited by Ministry of Health. Is that not it?
Yes.
They claim, when you go to their website, they claim that, oh, Ministry of Health accredited. Then you go to Ministry of Health database to find out. So you just don't publish, please. When you select the journal, you do a thorough work. Wherever there's a need for you to search, some of them, they are faking. They fake impact factor. They don't even belong to certain group, but they put it there. For instance, there's a journal I wanted to send my paper to, some society and communication. And they told me that it was a Scopus, what do you call it? Impact. I went there and they're only registered, but they are not impact factor. They didn't register for impact factor. So quickly, you have to do your investigations beyond what they are claiming. Are you okay? For instance, when you go to Web of Science, the Web of Science journals, if you just type Web of Science, then you put the name of the journal there. And the journal is claiming that they are SSCI or they are this and that and that. It will indicate whether truly or not they belong to that group. Are you okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
So in selecting your journal, please, you have to do thorough work. About 90% of your work, you have to do it to validate the information there. Thank you.
Thank you too. We are almost at the end of our today's session. And next on the agenda is vote of thanks. We'll take that from Linda Nati.
Okay, so on behalf of NUGS-Hangzhou and the organizing team, I must say we are most grateful to you, Mr. John Demioko, for your wonderful presentation. We've really learned a lot today, and we say thank you so much. And same goes to the organizers for putting together such an impactful program. Not forgetting you represented here today. Today's session wouldn't have been a success without you. Once again, thank you all for participating in today's meeting, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Linda. And we'll take a closing prayer from Evans Edu.
Hallelujah. Hello.
Amen.
Hello.
Amen.
Okay, so God richly bless you all for being part of this package. And once again, we bless God. Please shall we pray? Let's pray. Father, we want to thank you for such an opportunity like this to even gather or go together to want to know more with regards to every faith and every part that we are all studying. We ask, oh God, that we will not just be only, oh God, hearers of what our presenter has given unto us, but we ask for grace. Hello.
Hallelujah. Yes, on Kappa.
Hello.
Okay. Please, I'm still praying. Sorry, my network. That, oh God, the year by this time there will be a lot of testimony out of this program that we've had. We bless your name, oh God. We know that, God, even you're going to open our eyes to, oh God, not be lazy around, but God will put our feet down even to do more than what we expected. We give you all the praise for all the grace that is always sufficient, that everybody on this platform and even those who couldn't make it, they will, oh God, have their share, even in every publication and everywhere they want to get to. We declare that, God, it is fulfilled and it is done unto your glory. We thank you for grace that is available. Thank you for strength that is available for our academic work and the journey that is ahead of us. In the name of Jesus, we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Amen. So officially the meeting is over. Tomorrow we still have the last session. Tomorrow, same time. So you'd have to make it a point to be on the same platform with us tomorrow. So I'll hand over to the chairman